we mentioned I'm a fat kid at heart, right? It's like the worst day in grade school was like shirts versus skins, and I'm like,
I just wondered if I wore that shirt, the hooded with the long sleeve or the short, if my chest would pop like yours, if it would bulge like that.
Canon is for dummies and Nikon is for very smart people. And if you want to just take a damn good photo without going to college, a Canon is a better option.
Yeah.
Hey, Aaron, I want to get into photography. I want to take photos of animals from a long distance, and I have $1,000 budget. Okay, that's not going to happen.
And
I'm quick. I'm like a rabbit. But like, dude, I shot that elk. I was happy as a pig in poo. Like, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. First day, the sun's not even up. And then he edits things that people probably shouldn't hear, which you guys don't see that. We got a kick it butt pack out. I almost slipped up on that one, Katie. But he's a smart deer, right? He was old, he had a big pot belly, big swayed back, and gaunted up hips. Probably 8-9-year-old deer. Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, you're gonna die.
Why, yes, Brian, it is true.
That sounds terrible.
The days of our lives.
Hello, all right. You're listening to the Gritty Bowman, home of gritty bow hunting films, interviews, tall tales, and a wee bit of manly boasting.
I'm South Cox, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
Hey, this is Corey Jacobson, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
We bone and raised outdoors, and you've been listening to the Gritty Bowman.
There you go.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Jordan.
And you're watching
the Gritty Bowman.
If you like the show, please go to our website at grittybowman.com and subscribe to this podcast and tell your mates and pals about us. Do us a favour and please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. Send your questions and podcast ideas to grittybowman@gmail.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes, you can see the video version of this podcast on our website at www.grittybowman.com.
All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Bowman podcast. We're back with Aron Snyder, and Aaron's jealous of my new hat.
I am, because Jordan and Casey didn't send it to me. Probably because I forgot to send Jordan a backpack.
Dude, I got this hat free with my last Mountain Ops purchase. What's funny, though, is my wife was making fun of me the other day because she was folding all my clothes, my shirts and stuff, and she goes, "Have you bought any of these?" And I'm like, well, and everything's branded or has somebody's logo on it, and it's like all free. Like, I got free stuff, like a few shirts all throughout the summer when I was at Hoodoo and Tamarack and the Full Draw Film Tour, and so Mountain Ops, they gave me a couple free shirts, and so I get a couple of shirts here and there, and I wear the same shirts because I don't go shopping for clothes. I just don't buy clothes unless it's camouflage or hunting gear. Then I geek out and I buy clothes, but that's more like equipment. But if it's just branded wear or just T-shirts and stuff, I wear the same. You guys probably that watch the podcast know this. I wear the same shirts all the time. Wear the same hats all the time. It's like if they were free, I just wear them. So if you want me to market your product, just give me a free hat and I'll put it on. It's got to be cool though. It's got to be.
I got to send you a T-shirt. We got the new T-shirts.
Dude, your Kafaru shirts are awesome. The new ones. I saw them yesterday. I did ask a question on Facebook. I didn't get a response.
That's because I forgot. What was it?
No, I was making fun a little bit, and I just wondered if I wore that shirt, the hooded with the long sleeve or the short, if my chest would pop like yours, if it would bulge like that.
I'm a barrel-chested dude to begin with, but my arms, right, like they're just not with the chest anymore, right? Like they've shrunk. I mean,
dude,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, Bryce, my brother-in-law Bryce, Katie's husband, we work out together a couple days a week at least. We used to work out a lot more. but Gritty Bowman sucks my time. Bryce's big old chest. I mean, he's just deep chested, and
Yeah.
he's big chest. And then his arms are a little skinnier. And I have like a pretty flat chest. I'm not barrel chested. I'm not big like that. But my arms are kind of bigger. And so the two of us, we have like opposite, like our bodies are really different. He's got longer, skinnier legs. I got kind of more short and chubby. And it's funny because he'll put on a T-shirt and his chest will just be huge. And I'm like, man, I wish my chest was big like that. And then he'll look at me with my arm. He's like, man, how do you get your arms to look so big? And it's just genetics. You have little T-Rex arms sometimes.
Genetically screwed for my arms, but yeah, it is. It's funny. We were talking, we mentioned I'm a fat kid at heart, right? It's like the worst day in grade school was like shirts versus skin. And I'm like, don't pick me as a skin. Don't pick it. Oh yeah. I hated it. So I have to really concentrate on my diet now. And I mean, I'm relatively decently built, but then you have those guys in the gym you look at and you're like, what a like, just naturally huge, right? Or whatever. But anyway, but that's not what today's podcast is about.
No, today, no more rabbits, squirrels. We are trying to talk about cameras and camera equipment. And Aaron, we've done this podcast once before, but we never aired it because it just didn't turn out that well. So we're starting over. And Aaron's going to show us what camera gear he uses. We're not going to get into how he uses it per se that much, right, Aaron? It's just going to be what equipment are you using? Because there's a lot of guys out there asking questions about photography and film. I did a podcast on my film gear a while back, and people can go and check that out. And I've changed some of that since then. I'll probably do an update, but I want to get Aaron's take on his camera equipment and what he's learned over the years and what he's using.
Right. So I'll cover my lenses, what I've used, right? I'll go through all the cameras I've went through, which is way too many. Kind of my journey through photography, which is relatively short, but I've spent enough money to learn something. And then what packs I use, because I have kind of a special insert for my camera gear. And some cool little trinkets that work cool, the little chest clip deal that goes on the chest strap. And then if you're going to get into photography, what you want to look at, and then we'll go over this first, the things that I get questions about, and I'll just cover those first about photography equipment. Mm-hmm. We'll go through all of that. So to start things off, I generally get questions of, hey, Aaron, I want to get into photography. I want to take photos of animals from a long distance, and I have $1,000 budget. Okay, that's not going to happen. To get a legitimate Darren Epp, for example, is a great wildlife. He's a great photographer, great wildlife photographer. I think his lens was $12,000. It's an 800 millimeter, I think, and he can chime in. But the moral of the story is, a body, glass is more important than a body, but a body is important. Obviously, the autofocus, Canon has an insane autofocus. Nikon's is good. The Sonys that I run this one's got a 399 point autofocus, which is important for wildlife.
And basically, you're talking, for guys that don't know, I mean, you're talking about a DSLR camera with, when you say glass, you're talking about the lens.
The lens, right.
The detachable lens.
This is why Brian is such a great host, because I skip important parts like that. So with the body, for you don't have to go crazy on a body, but it does help. So the problem that you run into is there's kind of a void in the middle in price ranges to some degree of it's really not worth, in my opinion, to make a big step up until you make a really big step up. So if you have a decent camera and it costs you $500, like I don't know what's a Canon T3i or T5i, what's that?
Yeah, something like that, around 5 to 800, somewhere in there.
And you know the lenses are okay. You're going to take some pretty decent photos, but then you go to guys will see some photos I take or Darren or some other people that are great photographers, and you'll see like night shots. That night shot is pretty hard to accomplish unless you have a high-end DSLR full frame body. You have to have a full frame. You don't have to. It certainly helps. So what a full frame to like a micro 4/3 or APS-C sensor, for this easiest way to explain it would be if my little mouse pad here is your sensor, and
the sensor is inside the camera, and it's what captures the image. Something like
I
that.
won't go. Yeah, kind of.
Just high level.
I say it's the engine, but it's the most important thing in your camera is the sensor. It is where the light comes in. I'm not going to get into it because I'll probably screw it up. But to get really good low light night photos, you need a big sensor. And with a micro 4/3 sensor, it's exactly what it sounds. You only get part of the sensor, right?
Yep.
You're missing.
Yep. So if I can jump in here, so like if you have a DSLR. Full frame, the sensor's about the size of, let's say, this iPhone right here, this old iPhone, and then a full frame, the sensor's like this new iPhone 6 that's much larger, and
almost, actually, it'd be even bigger than that. But yeah, it's much bigger.
So there's a huge size difference in these sensors, and basically the way I understand it is, like you said, it just allows a lot more light and pixels to be gathered on the sensor. So when you buy a little camcorder, for example, the sensor's the size of smaller than the half of a dime.
Yeah.
Then you go and you buy a camera like what you're talking about with a full frame, and it's the size of, 3/4, let's say.
Yeah.
Combined. You're talking about a lot more pixel, a lot more light, a lot more ability to gather information for the photograph.
Right. And keep in mind, I'm not by any means an expert at all of this. So some of this will be my redneck understanding of photography.
Yep.
So
just perfect for most of us.
Well, and then you go to megapixels when you go to look at a camera. If you are going for, like, my current camera's 43 megapixels, or off the chart, it's insane. And those megapixels, even though it's a good way to sell a camera, it is not always the most important thing you should look at when buying a camera. Meaning, at a certain point, if I'm explaining this correctly, you can have too many megapixels. If the megapixels outweigh the other parts of the camera, for lack of a better explanation, it's too big because there's so many of them. They don't fit as well. Where if they were a little bit larger, they would actually make the photo look better.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so just to cut through that, I look at it this way. I don't care what it says for megapixels. I don't care what it says for sensor size. I don't care what it says for most of those numbers. Show me a freaking photograph that it took.
Yeah.
Show me a freaking video that camera and lens combo made, and let me judge what it looks like, and then decide whether, because you can publish all the stats you want on a piece of paper, and that camera can still look like crap. That image can still look like crap. I don't know what all goes into making it do what it does. Show me the image. So before I buy a lens, I'm out there looking at video taken with that lens. I'm surfing the net and finding all the video I can to decide if that lens is capturing enough quality image for my standards. And I don't care what the numbers say.
Right. And that's a good way to look at it and even then it's good to learn what that stuff is, but it's extremely complex. And there's certain things I look at more than other people might. Like I autofocus very little, and I manual focus a lot. So a high-end autofocus, a multi-point autofocus, like a Canon or it's not as important. Now, if I was shooting like Darren, bighorn sheep moving, an autofocus is more important, especially with low light, because if you're at manual focus and you're at a high f-stop, more things are cleared. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to go into that.
Yeah, you're going to take us down
we'll talk about that'll be step part 2. So either way, what I'm getting at is like a Sony RX100 is one of the best pocket backpackable cameras. There's like 1 through 4 right now, but the 2 and the 3 are about all you're going to need. It's got a 1-inch sensor, which is important. You can shoot in RAW with it. Now, when I say meaning shoot in RAW, I feel that any camera you buy, if it doesn't shoot in RAW, is kind of worthless if you're looking to do anything more than a few photos here and there on Facebook. You need it to shoot in RAW because that's the highest resolution photo that camera is able to produce. It hasn't been compressed or hacked up.
Yep.
And so when you put it in post-processing, when I say post-processing, like Lightroom or Photoshop, where you're going to tweak the photo, the higher resolution that photo is, the more you can do with it before it gets grainy and things like that.
Yep.
So I would strongly suggest looking at all of those. Well, Tony Treich is a guy who kills more stuff than smallpox. He listened to some guys on Rock Slide, which I just finally got out of the argument, right? I wasn't going to beat that horse to death. I was like, don't get the Olympus TG3 if you want to take great photos.
Yeah.
If you want to take okay photos, it's a great camera. It's definitely the most durable.
Okay.
It's waterproof. But if you want to take photos that are going to end up epic, the TG3 is not the best option. Where the Sony is a much better option. It's got Zeiss glass. The lens is Zeiss. You can't detach the lenses. It's great for digiscoping. So without going into all the different type of cameras that are point and shoot, if you're just looking for something like Colton did, they want to take a great photo with one lens that zooms in and out, able to work with it in post-processing. I would say the Sony RX100 is your best bet for a point and shoot.
Okay.
If you're wanting to take epic photos of all different levels, interchangeable lenses, I would say you need to look at spending, for one lens and a body, you're probably going to be $1,800 to $5,000, I would say is realistic. Well, not for one lens. One lens.
Yeah. I mean,
$1,800 to $5,000. My bodies on mine are $3,300.
I will say this. One question I have for you is you've used a lot of full frame cameras, and what you're saying is if you really want to go epic, you want to get those cameras with the big sensors.
Right, and I mean there is very good cameras that are micro four thirds or APS-C sensors. Your camera is one of them.
Yeah, I have the Canon 70D. It has a crop sensor on it, the APS-C sensor. It's smaller. It's smaller than the full frame, and it takes. People can go check out our films and our photographs. It takes really awesome photographs. Great film, and it's a crop sensor camera. It's a good camera. I mean, look at our stuff.
Very good for film too.
Yeah, but it has some film features and touchscreen and things that make it really user friendly. And when I first got into the filmmaking, that was kind of important to me because I was a little, all the buttons and all the stuff to keep track of. I really liked having the touchscreen. Now that I'm a lot more familiar with cameras and understand them more, it doesn't bother me. But as a beginner, I do highly recommend the Canon 70D. It's pretty user-friendly. It'll get everything you need. Now, Aaron's right. If I'm taking a night photograph, it's just not going to capture the light the same way as a full-frame camera does.
Or the longer distances.
Yep.
It also helps. Like this photo here, that was taken at about 400 yards, and that was with a Nikon 810 full-frame camera. And a 150 to 600 Tamron, which is a good. It's not a super fast lens, which we'll go into that into the part two.
Yep.
But I had it on a tripod and I had a remote, had it set up. But that Tamron lens, which is probably the cheapest option as far as a solid, super telephoto. I mean, it's $1,300, and that's the cheap. The good ones are $3,000 plus. Now you look at when we're talking, and I'm just going to pull up a few photos for examples. This photo right here. night shot of the teepee. Sorry, my screen's all screwed up.
Yep.
What happens when you shoot a photo? The higher you have to bump up the ISO, and we'll go into all of this in another part, the more grainy the photo. And the ISO helps compensate for lack of light for the best way I can explain it. The larger the sensor, though, the less ISO has to be bumped up for the most part. So that helps for night shots.
So basically, when you're taking shots at night and you have a big sensor, basically it allows you to get the photograph you want without losing image quality. But
exactly.
If you try to take the photo with a smaller sensor camera late at night, you're going to lose image quality. You'll get the photo, but it'll also kind of be fuzzy and grainy like an old, Yeah,
exactly. Like that's probably hard to see, but two guys sitting by side a lantern, right? That's John and Ben, and you're not going to get a photo like that. Not tooting my own horn. One, I had to get them to stay still, had to get all the adjustments right, get the lighting perfect, get my shutter speed right, all this different stuff. And I tried it. You can get great photos with an APS-C or micro Four Thirds sensor. You'll get good ones, there's no doubt. But if you're a type A personality that just likes to dive into things and just get fully involved in them and learn it and get the best, I probably would not get an APS-C sensor because you will get a full frame later, probably.
Yeah, I'm at that point now where it's like, I want a full frame camera.
And if you're, keeping in mind to try and save you money, if you're just a guy that wants a little bit better photos, not quite to go fully epic and sell your photos and stuff, which I'm doing now, but you want to take a solid photo. You've got a few options. I would say that Sony I mentioned, but you also have a few other options. The Olympus OD EM1, which is another cropped sensor. My buddy Paul, he actually got a Sony A7R, which was one like I was using, and went back to the Olympus. It's very complex, and it's formatting as far as what buttons to push to go where. But you can take an insane photo with that.
I recommend for people new to this and getting involved is to buy the Canon 70D. It's $1,000 roughly, just body only, and then go buy the Canon Nifty 50 lens. It's $100. It's a little 50 millimeter fixed focal length lens. It doesn't have a zoom, and the zoom is your legs. You walk closer or you walk farther away.
It's a prime lens.
It's a prime lens, and that combination is about $1,100, maybe $1,200. Comes with a couple batteries and a charger, and that's about. I mean, that's going to give you some pretty killer photos and images for stuff that's just you and your buddies, trophy shots, around camp stuff. Now, if you're going to film wildlife at any kind of distance, you're going to have to step up with that $1,000 to $1,500 lens at a minimum to punch out those long distances, or you're going to have to just film with the phone scope and your digital phone or something instead.
Or Digiscoping kit. With
That to me is your budget level. Now you have a lot more experience going with lighter cameras, smaller cameras with the Sony instead of Canon. Why did you switch?
Well, and I went, just so we're all on the same page, I started out with a crappy point and shoot that we all have for $180 at Walmart. And I always liked taking photos, but I didn't know what I was doing. And then several twists and turns aside, these are the heavy hitters I bought. I bought the Sony RX100, and then I bought a Sony NEX5, and then an NEX6, and then an NEX7. Those are crop sensor cameras, the NEXs. And then I went back to an Olympus, the OD EM, and then I got the newer version, the OD EM1. And the entire time, I'm getting great photos sometimes. And I'm getting not so great photos others. I sold that and I bought a Canon, the new one's the 6D, or is that the old one? Is the new one the 60D or the 6D?
I think it's the 6D.
So I bought a 6D, which is their I wouldn't call it a budget. It's their affordable full frame camera. And it's a great camera. It does actually, it has better autofocus and low light than.
And what is that, like $2,000?
I think it's less than that, but yeah, $1,800 maybe without the lens.
Okay.
And I'm leaving the lenses out of this first discussion. And then I only had that like 3 weeks, and I had a month to return it. I returned it, and I got a 5D Mark III Canon, which is a great camera.
Yeah.
What I will say is, in the Canon Nikon debate, Nikon is a better camera in my opinion in many ways, but it's not by much. And Canon is for dummies, and Nikon is for very smart people. And if you want to just take a damn good photo without going to college, a Canon is a better option.
Yeah.
Nikon
I started out with a Nikon, and I thought it took better pictures, but it was a pain in the butt to use. And as soon as I switched to the Canon, I was like, the dials, the buttons, I was like, wow, this is cool. So even though I got better photos, it was by such a small margin, it wasn't worth it.
And I took great photos with the Canon, and I'm learning along the way, obviously, even now. And I'll still keep learning for the rest of my life. And then I went to a Nikon D810, and I loved that camera. I didn't mind how the Nikon worked. I bought a second Nikon body. And all this time, I'm going through lenses like underwear, as far as back and forth Canon lenses, because they don't interchange, right? I've got Olympus, and I'm trading those in. I'm getting Canon lenses, and I'm trading those in. I get Nikon lenses, and I got a bunch of those. But man, packing a full frame camera around for lack of any other explanation, it sucks. It is heavy.
Big camera.
The body's a couple pounds. The lenses are a couple pounds.
Yep.
And So I got to a point where I was looking at the Sonys. Paul had gotten one, an A7R, which is a new camera. It's a mirrorless full frame.
Yep.
And I got an A7. What's that?
I was going to say, too much detail. Just keep going.
Sorry. I spent way too much money. So I ended up with a Sony A7R II, which is the newest, latest, greatest lightweight camera, and multiple lenses. I guess what I would say, before I confuse people anymore, is if I would have learned how to use a camera first, meaning a Sony NEX7 takes, at the time, a far better photo than my brain was capable of, I probably would have kept it longer. But the problem was I was just pissed I couldn't put it on auto and just take a great photo. You can't. You're right. You have to learn to use a camera. So whatever camera you choose to get, don't be a chucklehead, throw it on auto. Learn your camera, and you will probably not have to go through the whole rigmarole that I did, because eventually I just learned I need to shoot on we won't go into it too much, but not shoot on auto. You have to go to manual on a lot of stuff.
And so I think that can be really intimidating for people about learning how to use a camera.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite resources is to learn, and it's the link is actually in my camera podcast. I think that's like episode, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that, of Gritty Bowman podcast. If you go back and look that up, we put in there I put in there links to all the camera gear and equipment that I've used, and I talk about it. And I also put a link in there to tutorials, places where I got classes online. And one of my favorite ones that I came across was michaelmaven.com, and the link should be in that other one. And there's crash courses on the Nikon D7100 or the Canon SL1 or the Canon 70D crash course, right? It's like a 4-hour tutorial. And there's some that just gives you DSLR basics. What is ISO? What is shutter speed? What is, how do you deal with exposure? And I'm telling you that those tutorials are genius. An idiot can listen to that and watch it, and there's diagrams and charts. It's like 4 hours, and which seems like a long time, but you watch it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's how you use a camera. Wow, That's how you use a camera. I didn't even know. And then, and right away, it's like a little education goes a long way. take some
Yeah.
time. If you really want to take great photos and you really want to learn, find some tutorials online, download them and watch them. Put them right on my phone. And I just brush up on some of it now and then. There's lots of great materials. Michael, the Maven, is just one that I use. Like I said, there's a link. If you PM me, I could probably send it to you as well. So you can kind of go through the different cameras and options out there, and they just teach you how to use them.
And I was lucky enough, I knew a professional photographer.
If you got a mentor who can stand over your
Yeah.
shoulder and teach you, that's even better.
Well, because I'm not, I was with him for just a day.
Yeah.
But I asked very important questions. He told me 5 key things to photography, and I was on my way. That's about all it took.
I went to the Full Draw Film Tour School, the Full Draw Film School, for a weekend, and met cool people like South Cox and Christy Titus up there. Met Jason Phelps. We, in that school, in like 3 days, I learned more in those 3 days hanging out with Grady Rawls and Cody Kellum, teaching me about cameras. I learned in 3 days of crash coursing on cameras. I learned more than I learned in like 7 months of trying to learn on my own. So, I mean, leveraging the help of someone who can just stand there and do it. And then I say, I have friends who own these cameras and never use them. That's the second part. Just go out and freaking use it. Turn it on. You're never going to learn if you don't turn it on.
And that's how I learned I'm able to take the photos I'm able to take is I'd read a little, I'd watch a video, I'd screw around in my living room. I'm like, I got a decent idea. And then I'd climb to the top of Green Mountain. I'd do some dry runs of night shooting or water. And then when I got in the field, I knew how to do it.
So I quiz you on this, and I kind of already know your answer. I see this all the time. Guys take the cameras, put them inside their backpacks, and then climb a mountain, hike, go all over the place. They've been there 5 days, and they've dug their camera out of their pack twice for a photo session.
Well,
you can't take pictures of it if it's in your freaking backpack. So, Aaron, what's your experience there?
Yeah, well, I wrote a whole article on Rockslide called "Telling Your Story," and it was just you may not seem important to you at the time, and many people give me crap while I'm out there. I'm like, they call me Wang, right? I'm everywhere taking photos. Like literally, if you're eating, peeing, I probably got a photo of you, right? That's all I do is take photos. And
I'm the same way.
But at the end of it, I have this epic photo gallery to tell of the story. I don't even have to put in words. I just posted a bunch of photos on Rockslide.
Go and watch Phil Mendoza's sheep hunt, dude. It's like there is a photograph for every bit of the story, it feels like.
And I will go over now. We'll cover all this other stuff in the next one, or it's going to take 7 hours. So this right here is what I use. Is what I use. I'm going to get it off me a little bit. This is it's from Peak Design, and I'll show you how this works. So that opens up, and then
the people listening, basically Aaron has a bracket that can attach to
your shoulder strap
on your backpack.
On your backpack, and it's a push button. You just push that red button, and your camera slides out of it. And I'll pull my camera out and go over this piece here a little bit more in a minute. So this goes on any trip, any hunt, anything I go on.
So your camera is like mounted to your left shoulder, let's say, right there. So you can just, with the click of a button, you can pull it up, take a photo, stick it back on the clip.
And sometimes I'm like Wyatt Earp, and I run 2. I've got one on each shoulder. I double it up. Because sometimes I'll run like a 50 millimeter, which is a little bit closer up, and then I'll have a wide angle. And then that way, no matter what, because changing lenses in the field sucks, so I'll carry 2 bodies.
Yep.
But it's from Peak Design. They make some great equipment, but I'll go over this in a little bit more.
Yeah.
So for my standard just camera pack, I've got a couple options, not to pimp out Kifaru too much, but this is a Zing. And what I have in the Zing is I've got, okay, you can kind of see that.
Yep.
I usually attach a belt pouch or 2. This is just a small side pocket I put my tripod in. But the 22 mag or the Zing works really well for a camera pack. And the reason why is I'll just pull it out. some of the smaller stuff that I run goes in here, lens wipes or whatever, or my food. But inside of this is and it actually stays in there when I'm taking photos. This is a f-stop ICU pod, and it's meant to go inside of a backpack.
Okay.
And so
F-stop, that's the brand name.
F-stop's the brand name, and they call it internal. Is it IC? Yeah, I think it's an ICU.
Yeah. So it's like a foam case with foam dividers and stuff that
and you can run it in. And I'll bring this down just a little bit. Hopefully that helps.
Yep.
So one of the other things, so on the bottom of this camera, this is a Sony A7R2.
Mm-hmm.
That is a Arca Swiss mount. And what that, just look up Arca Swiss mount so I don't have to explain everything, but it's a universal mount. So this clips in, for those of you who are listening, the bracket that's attached to the bottom of my camera slides in. Oh, I got to loosen it. Just kidding. Hold on.
Slides into your bracket that's on your shoulder strap or your waist belt or whatever you hook it to.
Right. And since I have these things screwed out because it's not screwed down, it's not working correctly. But it slides in right like that. So when I'm wearing it on my chest, right here, I just clip it on.
Yep.
And then I push the button and it comes out. And the reason why that's...
Before you did that and you were carrying your camera, did you just have a neck strap or something?
Yeah, I had a chest rig for a while, and then I had a neck strap. It was not cool.
It sucked, didn't it?
It was horrible. Yeah.
And it's tough if you have binoculars and a chest rig, and you're trying to have that also hanging around your neck. It just doesn't work that well.
Yeah. So that slides on. I got it right there, and then you just.
Yep.
And that's it. So that's from Peak Design, and then this is an Arca Swiss plate.
And it feels really nice on your shoulder strap.
If you get a giant lens, no. But yeah, for the most part, it feels great.
Yep.
So I also have an Arca Swiss. This is a Gitzo tripod, and this is I think it's called a Suri head.
Yep.
But this head is an Arca Swiss mount, so everything works in continuity with each other. So I have this same mount that goes on the Peak Design chest clip.
Yeah. That
same mount fits on my tripod head.
Yeah, I've got an adapter. Basically, I found a way to, all of my equipment, tripods, glide cams, everything uses the same adapter.
Which is important if you're trying to stay lightweight. Mm-hmm. So that's how I mount my camera to my shoulder. One of the other things that Peak Design makes is some pretty nifty chest or shoulder slings. This is a quick release shoulder sling. They never come off. This will also hook to a wrist lanyard that you can get, choker. And then they also have ones that are really padded. This is the lightweight version. It's just a strap. But I have the really padded one. And what will happen for the most part, if I'm hanging off cliffs taking photos of guys, I will at least throw on the chest strap so I don't lose it, or a choker on my wrist so I don't lose the camera. And all this works together in continuity with each other. Like everything works the same. Now, what I did the other day, because Jody was screwing around with some stuff that we were doing, my wife, she wanted to try one of these cameras out, and I basically rigged together. This is a Swarovski for binocular neck harness, but it's really padded. So I took those quick release tabs off and I just mounted it like you normally would your chest harness. So you can still run whatever you want. It doesn't matter. It's just that's quick release. So anyway, that's how I run I'll pull this stuff out. That's how I run my quick access chest rig and the tripod. Now in here, I have several different lenses. So I would say a 50 millimeter is probably a must-have for any photographer. Not filmographer, videographer, but a photographer. Mm-hmm. Running around, snap shooting in town, around camp, that's going to be one of your best bets. I would say close to tied with that or right behind is a 35 millimeter. If you're looking for a one do-all lens when you start out, to me, a 35 millimeter is your best bet. It's pretty wide. You have to use your feet. It's a prime lens, meaning it's not adjustable. You can't zoom in. You'll figure that out as you go in. But either way, this here, these lenses that I use now, this is a 15 millimeter Voigtlander. So it's pretty wide. It's really wide. This is a 12 millimeter fisheye, which is ridiculously wide. Those are my landscape lenses for shooting big blown out scenery. This here is a 90 millimeter, or excuse me, this is not, they're about the same size. This is a 35 millimeter right here. It's really heavy. It's a super fast lens, which we'll go into in a different podcast, but super fast lens. This is a 90 millimeter macro. So this is for close-ups. I can use this for portraits, but my wife got a wild hair and wanted to take photos of birds and bugs. So we got a 90 millimeter macro, and it has a super close focal length, like this far away. I can focus on something. So you can make little ants look like giant horses with that lens.
Yep.
This is a 70 to 200. Which is about as big as a zoom as I get anymore unless I rent a lens. Go ahead.
How did you like the 7200 compared to the 150 to 600 millimeter Tamron?
I'll get to that in 1 second.
Okay.
And then, because I only got one lens left. And this is a 55 millimeter 1.8. Now, the rest of the stuff in here is lens wipes. This is a hurricane blower for blowing off your lenses or if you get something on your sensor. Other than that, my kit's pretty simple. After that, I carry some electrical tape, some extra batteries, just normal stuff. Now, as far as lenses go, a 150 to 600 is far better for wildlife. It's not even remotely close. But it's pretty worthless after that. Like, you're not going to probably photograph a wedding with a 150 to 600. It's too much. A 70 to 200 for if you're going to photograph a seminar or animals at the zoo or a wedding, a 70 to 200 is unbeatable. I mean, it's a perfect lens for that, in my opinion. It's okay for wildlife. It's not great. But like at an archery shoot, like if I was taking photographs of an archery tournament, a 70 to 200 is a pretty good lens to have because you can pick your distance. I've got some really cool arrow flight shots with the arrow in flight. Anyway, some people's opinions will vary on this. This is just what I found to work the best. Go ahead. What were we going to say?
I use my 70 to 200. I have a 70 to 200 millimeter Tamron. Their Art Series lens, and I use that lens for 90% of everything I film. I always end up going back to it, and it's a super fast lens. It's 2.8, that's the lens I use for the most part for everything. And then if I need more distance, I put a doubler on it, and that gets me out to 400 millimeters. And I think my f-stop is fixed at like 5 something. But it's fixed throughout the whole focal length.
We'll have to cover that in a different podcast.
Yeah. So what I wonder is, when you use the 150 to 600, you get that extra 200 millimeters beyond that of like a doubler and your 70. How much more reach does that give you? How did you like it?
So I'm not a fan of doublers. I had one. They're not a horrible idea. For photography, the more glass you add, the crappier your photo gets. Lack of a better explanation. With that 600, what I liked is that was equivalent to like probably a 20 by 40 spotting scope. And don't quote me on that. There's a way to figure it out. It doesn't. But the extra 200 was huge because I'd have to use a tripod a lot. But, it's amazing when you have a 70 to 200 and you've gone from a 50 millimeter to a 7200. The glass is very easy to fill. Like, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then you go out and you're trying to photograph mule deer. the glass is going to be harder to fill, and you're going to want to get a 4 or a 600. And then once you get that 600, which is my point, if you start with a 70-2 and go straight to a 6, going back to a 4 is probably difficult.
Yeah.
Because you're used to be able, you've got the legs on the thing. You're used to be able to reach out.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. The doubler on my lens is nice. It doesn't degrade the image too bad. What it does is it allows me at the 400 to keep a, pretty decent aperture. It gets me enough light. My biggest concern basically with the 150 to 600 was light gathering ability.
I had 20.
It did a good job.
I think it's an f5.6 to 6.5.
Yeah, and that was plenty for your shots.
Yeah,
thing is we've talked about this before too. With video, I can't get away with the ISO levels that you can with photography.
Well, and I was just going to say, explaining some of these things we're talking about. You have ISO, you have your exposure, your white balance, your shutter speed, and your aperture priority. So there's many variables you have to adjust on your camera. When we say a fast lens, that means it's a super fast. The aperture or the f-stop or the aperture is super fast.
What that means really, if we say it's a fast lens, is it gathers in a lot of light. It's just it allows you to put in more light to the lens. So if you're shooting in the dark or really low light in the morning or in the evening, right, you get a lot more light in there. Whereas if you have a lens that's slow, you can't even see through it.
Right, but it also has to do with how much, when you start screwing with your f-stop, you also has to do a lot with how much is clear or how much is in focus. If you have, which we'll go into this in a different podcast, but if you're at f2.8, your f-stop's at 2.8, you're only going to have a little bit of what's clear or what's in super quality, high quality focus. Where if you go to f8, it's hundreds of yards or whatever. It's tons of room.
Right. It's like for people who aren't familiar with it, it's like when you're watching a film and you notice that the subject in the front of the camera is in focus, but behind it, it's a blurry background. Versus where there's subject in front of the film is in focus and the background is also in focus. Everything's in focus.
Yeah.
Those are two different ways to film where, you have the guy in focus in the blurry background versus the guy in focus and everything's in focus behind him. That kind of thing that look you can get with a fast lens, basically.
Right.
It's hard to do if you don't have a fast lens. And this lens we're talking about, the 150 millimeter to 600 millimeter lens, isn't really that fast, but it gives you that focal length where you can zoom out really far. And I think that's about as high as my budget will allow me to go for buying a lens. Because if I want to buy a lens that's faster at 600 millimeters, what is it, like $6,000?
At a minimum, yeah.
To 12, or 20?
I rented some to taste the Kool-Aid, right?
Yeah.
It didn't taste good enough for me. And I'm a guy that I'll dump the money into it.
Yeah.
One, I'm not a big wildlife photographer. I would say that a good Digiscoping kit will be enough for most, unless you're going to sell your portraits. So
the quality of what you're getting with a good Digiscoping and a Digiscoping setup is basically like your Swarovski, your Vortex spotting scope with some kind of attachment to a camera.
And I have a special adapter from Swarovski that is made. It's not like a piece of PVC pipe where people kind of redneck it, which those work. This actually locks into my camera body, and then I lock it in, and I take the eyepiece off my Swarovski, and then that all mounts together, and I'm using Swarovski glass with a high-end camera.
Swarovski has probably the best Digiscoping setup out there by far. You're going to pay for it, but I've looked at what you're getting out of a Swarovski Digiscoping setup versus some of the others, and it's pretty nice image.
I'm gonna pull it up here real quick, just for the price wise, just so people know. So for the hold on, because what it really boils down to is what. I hope that wasn't for me. What you want to get out of photography. If you want to just take some decent photos and throw them on Facebook and share them with your buddies, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of money. I mean, get a decent camera with decent reviews and
$2,000
or less. I mean,
1,500.
Yeah, that's on the high end. I would say that Sony RX100 takes plenty good enough photos to go on your hunt and take some photos at camp. And if you learn how to use it, it takes even better photos.
But I agree with you. Like 1,500, you can get to where you can take photographs of camp, photographs of post kill experiences. You can take hiking scenery shots. Okay, it doesn't take a really fancy setup for that. But Aaron, if you're going to film wildlife, the actual animals you're hunting,
well, I'll get to that. That's what
you got to spend more money just because you got to get a lens that has that zoom capability.
A lot more money, and that's what I mean. If it depends on what you want out of photography. So if you're not that concerned about epic, like crystal clear image quality, get like a Sony RX100, do the PVC pipe thing, throw it on your spotting scope, and you'll at least be able to show people an adequate photo of the animal you were trying to photograph.
You see those setups all the time on YouTube.
You've got $20 in PVC pipe, $5 in Velcro, and $500 in a point and shoot camera.
Yep.
And it'll also take decent enough photos around camp.
That's what we use. Anthony has a Razor Vortex spotting scope, and he has a little PVC adapter and a little Velcro, and pops his smartphone on there and records. It's phone scope, same thing, just a little plastic container. You slip it on there. But Aaron, the image quality you get from that compared to a 150 to 600 millimeter zoom,
yeah, it's night and day different.
It's one looks like it belongs in a magazine, and one looks like you're looking through a Coke bottle.
Yeah, it's $600 for the TLS APO Digiscoping adapter from Swarovski.
That's just for the adapter.
And then you can use your camera, for example.
Yep.
How much was your camera? $1,000?
$1,000.
So you've got $1,600 into the Digiscoping adapter in the body, and that's to just hook it to a Swarovski.
Now, the Swarovski is how much for spotting scope?
On the cheap end, $1,800.
And on the expensive end,
$5,700 for an ATX 95.
Jeez. Isn't there one?
Now, I'm going to get back to that. And here's what it all boils down to is you're going to go broke. If you want to take, and I learned this the hard way. I sold all kinds of stuff to be able to afford this. But I really like photography. I mean, it's my thing. But if you compare a $150 to $600, $1,300 Tamron or a $6,000 6 or 400 millimeter prime, like a non-fixed focal length.
Yep.
Yeah, one's going in the centerfold of a Bugle magazine, and one's going on the internet. I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, the right. Photo, and I'll pull up a few more photos, and by no means am I saying you have to do what I did or what anyone does. I'm just letting you know I spent a lot of money on things I probably shouldn't have, learning along the way. I just didn't know. You only know what you know, and I didn't have enough people around me to guide me, to let me know. So here's a good example of, this is a pretty cool photo Colton took of me glassing, and that's with a Sony RX100.
Yeah, that's cool.
Great photo. He magic moded it or whatever, the sunset setting, and it does it for you. And I mean, it took a great photo.
Yeah.
But then you look at this photo, and that's of one of our shelters. Image quality is ridiculous. It's got decent saturation, yep. Super clear. Well, that's a $600 setup to a $4,800 setup. Is that worth it to you? That's going to be your question, right? And then as far as low light goes, when you start getting into super low light photography, that's one a buddy of mine took. That's pretty cool. You're not going to do that with $1,000 setup. It doesn't matter which one it is.
Right.
And I'll pull up just a couple more to give you guys ideas.
It really does depend on what your goals are.
Exactly.
But what you're saying, and I think what I want to get out there is, if you're a guy that's not really that heavily into it, you can get into it and take, because I'm really excited about people taking better photos of their adventures afield and their hunting experience, because I think it speaks to people, anti-hunters especially, non-hunters, in a way that puts hunting in a much different light. When you got a guy that's taken a picture with the tongue of the elk hanging out, blood is all over it, and he's got a crappy photograph of it, it just kind of screams redneck, uneducated, things like that. It doesn't necessarily do a lot for the justice of what you're doing out there.
That's a Tamarack shot.
That's nice.
$1,300 lens. Well,
and so I'm all for guys spending that, $1,500 for a setup that gets you the ability to take 80% of the photos you would take in the field.
I would say 80 is real accurate, because minus extreme low light, that's it.
And distance.
In distance, excuse me. Yep. That's what you're going to be lacking. And even distance with the lens, obviously, is, the body is the only thing you'll be lacking in was extreme low light and night shots. And you'll still get some good ones for the buck.
Yep, you will.
With the lens, for monetarily speaking, distance. You're going to lose distance. But what I can tell you is, if you get started and you buy a $1,000 body and you buy a $600 to $800 lens, a used one, you will be plenty busy for quite some time, even learning how to use the camera and perfecting the art. And by that time, you'll have saved up money and you'll know what lens you want to buy.
And I think it's well worth the investment for that. Well worth the investment for that return and for what you get out of it. When you look at like your sheep hunt or Pinch's goat hunt and some of the like the hunts I'm on, and you look at the film or the video that's been taken, 90% of that, 80% of it is taken with the short lenses. Yes. This something around that. It could be done with a $1,500 lens or a $1,500 camera lens combination, somewhere in there. It's what I'm getting at is, most of the photos you take to tell your story of your trip are not the ones.
All of them are.
Yeah, there's just a few where you need distance or nighttime. Just a sliver, and those are like, so to me, those are like almost like luxury photos.
Well, I don't know telephoto shots. Any of them are of my adventures, because I don't want to carry it. So there is no big lenses going with me for that. And quite honestly, on a hunt or a trip, I'm super fine with a cell phone photo of an animal, to have all these epic ones and say, hey, here was the animal. Okay, now here's the rest of the story. Yeah. But you'll get okay night shots with a decent body and a decent lens. They won't be quite as clear. The image quality won't be there. But one man's another man's gold. Like, if you don't know, like, to most of your friends, I'm my hardest critic on photography. But some of my photos that I don't like, my friends are like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. My wife loves them, and I'm like, Yeah. I'm a little harder on myself than I should be, because if it gets the point across, it's a good start, and then you can save up, and you'll know if you want to get into it even more.
I look at the Full Draw Film Tour and some of the films in there, and some of those films, the footage is impeccable. I mean, it's just perfect, and the camera and the photography is just flawless. But a lot of the films I enjoyed were ones done on far cheaper cameras with far lower quality film. And so I think that we often have that attitude like, well, we need this really expensive equipment or we can't accomplish what we need. And the truth is, when it comes down to photography, I think how you compose your shots, how you work within the limits of your technology's ability has a lot more to do with the quality of your story and what you've got. And like you said, most people, that detail, it's lost on them. They don't see it. They don't see what you're seeing because you spent so much time in photography. And that's 80% of the people out there looking at the photos. They're just like, killer photo, man. And you're looking at it going, dude, the shadows are washed out. Everything looks, it's not crisp. It's blurry. It's too noisy. It's grainy. You're complaining about it, and yet it's a pretty stellar photograph or.
Well, I think the other
reel.
thing that would be seriously noted is how many people. Well, we've already mentioned it. Learn to use your camera. Read the manual. I'm going to bring up Luke Johnson. If you call me Luke, and you have a camera and you have the ability to read, and you ask me a simple question about adjusting your ISO, I don't mind answering answering the question for you. But you're an intelligent man, Luke. Read the manual. You can learn all of that from the manual way easier than I'm going to be able to explain it to you.
Now, I've watched Luke. It looks like he knows quite a bit about photography.
No. He takes a lot of photos, and then a few of them come out good, which is completely fine. And I love that he's taking the photos. It's great.
Dude, they're gorgeous. I see some pretty cool stuff Luke gets some photos of.
But it was amazing to me how much he must take a lot of photos to get some good ones, because you literally there's as far as you get to certain levels like with archery and you need help. Yeah. You're going to have to find somebody that's walked down your road. Like me going to a camera store and asking about backpacking with a camera, probably not going to help me much.
Yeah.
You got to talk to somebody that's done it.
Yeah.
Because you have. Go ahead.
But you're right. You're right. Like, I've sent this tutorial that anybody with no camera skill whatsoever, I've sent them a link and said, watch this 4-hour tutorial over the next few weeks and learn. And then we can talk, because then you have a really basic understanding, and then I can help you from there. But if people try to bypass the work involved and not get the foundation, it's like, I don't have the time or the hours to teach you. It's just not.
I'm going to drop manhole covers on people now. My friend Jason,
Here you are. You're just going to piss off a whole bunch of people.
I'm okay, because it irritates me, because I barely graduated high school, right?
Yeah.
And I learned photography relatively quickly. I'm not an overly intelligent man, right? Yeah. I just did it. Mm-hmm. I sold Jason a camera a month ago. He's selling it because it just won't take epic photos on auto. And I'm like, well, dude, you can't buy, the idea of buying a super high-end camera, you'll get better photos, but it certainly does not do everything for you. You have to put your own effort into it. So I'm like, well, Jay, just learn how to use the camera.
Yeah.
I don't have time for that. And I'm like, you're stuck in Europe, dude.
Auto,
you got all the time in the world.
Like I said, a lot of people are intimidated by DSLR. And when I first started looking at it and reading about it online, I was like, what? I was so lost. Go watch a tutorial like Michael Maven's tutorial. Go watch one where it's got a slide deck and some images and concepts are being explained. Dude, 4 hours, that's amazing what you can learn from a competent teacher.
And everyone is different in their learning.
Read the book. Yeah, some people are really good about just reading. I need visual.
I'm not a big video guy. Yeah. I'm a quick reader and a doer. To my own fault, that is not the fast way to learn. But I like to go out and do it. And everybody has their strong points. I'd say night photos and landscape are one of my stronger points. that's what I focused on. And taking great landscape shots, it's a mountain. It's not as difficult to learn. Low light photos, I've found is an art, and so I focused on learning that first. And by no, there's lots of guys that take photos better than me at low light, but
Dude,
I learned.
I don't know any.
Well, what I learned is it's like triage. You walk up to it like you basically pick out your, like if you were going to be in a fight in a bar with multiple guys, pick out the guy that can really beat your ass first. That's the guy you focus on. Okay, well, if a low light photo, for me, that's my brightest object because that's what's going to be blown out. So I need to figure out my settings off my biggest problem in that photo, whether it be the lantern, a guy's headlamp, the moon, or the stars.
Right.
So my adjustments are first focused on that, and then I just start breaking it down from there. Oh, well, I need to go a little bit lower on my f-stop. I can probably go a little higher, a little lower on my ISO. I can go a little higher on my f-stop because I got enough light.
Yep.
That kind of stuff. Oh, drop the shutter speed.
Which, if you haven't messed around with the camera and you don't understand those basic things, you're just speaking a foreign language.
But I learned that by reading the manual, right? It wasn't anything. I guess what I'm getting at, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant, there's no special sauce. Like I just read it, and
we live in a world though, like you can just go buy a camera and turn it on auto, and people get decent photographs.
And they do, and I get guys that like, why would I buy all that? I get good photos with my iPhone.
Yep.
Well, yeah, on a tiny screen, blow that bad boy up to 4x6, and it's going to look like Mozart painted.
Well, or you're right that the image quality is a lot lower, but it also, every camera is awesome when it's under the ideal conditions.
Yeah.
Right. It's like I don't have to be a great photographer when the lighting it's just right. Everything is perfect. I look like a freaking pro. It's a lot of times, the case. That's great, but what I want to do is be able to take a photo when the lighting, or film when the lighting's horrible, when the conditions are terrible, when there's fog. I want to be able to pull out that image in a way that looks really good under horrible conditions. And so that's where that skill comes in. You can live with just the fact that you have crummy photos, and they're still photos. It still tells your story.
I think, though, you're right about people get intimidated by some of the numbers, and I can't do it.
Yeah.
Well, don't spend a lot of money on a camera. Then maybe just stick with what you got and take a bunch of photos on auto, and you'll be fine. If that's what you're into. I hate to see people waste money for one on something way more expensive than they'll ever get into. And I hate to see people that want to get into it get frustrated and give up before they go maybe to the next level, because photography is super fun.
Yeah.
And if you just bought a $500 to $1,200 setup and you saved up for it, you can take some amazing photos in 80% of what you're going to want to do. And that 80%, believe me, is years of having fun before you get bored and we're like, I'm going to go take pictures of bighorn sheep.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I think so too. So I just, my parting words here are, if you're interested in photography and you want to get these images, don't be intimidated by a DSLR. Go out there, like you said, read the book, take a tutorial, find someone who can help you out and play with the camera and just do it. Just start doing it. Start taking those photos, start messing around with it. It's the best way to learn. And then share those photos. I mean, share that story. Share the video. You just can't get video out of a camcorder that you can get out of a DSLR, at least a consumer grade. So,
no.
I mean, look at that. There's a reason that lens is $2,000 and it's this big and it's giant. It's like a spotting scope. It's like a binocular. The glass makes a huge difference, and you're just not getting that out of a camcorder. It's trying to make up for, in my mind, the lack of glass and the lack of sensor with technology. which is like what your cell phone does. It takes amazing video. It really does. But it's like, it's not as rich. It doesn't have the same look as it does when you have that giant piece of glass on there that is more mechanical than digital, I guess. Kind of.
Yeah, and I would say if anyone with my limited knowledge, I will help you in any way I can. Shoot an email or whatever in, because I mean, there's some cases it's just like a pack or anything else. I will if you just say, hey, I want to take photos of my kill shots and around camp. Easy enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, as long as you have realistic, goals and your amount in your wallet and they all kind of work together, at least you'll know what you'll need to save if
Yeah. Feel free to send us questions, and there's the questionnaire on the website too, where you can send us a note. And
just don't ask me about film. Ask Brian about film. That's not my thing.
One thing that I would say is, this podcast may not be for everyone, because there's just some people who just aren't into photography. They want to hear about hunting or backpacking. But it's a big part of what you and I do and what we love to do. And so we're going to have more discussions on this that are probably just tailored to a different group, a subset of the people out there. So we want to get into more about, settings on the camera, what we actually use for different things, how you touched on just briefly, how you do your night shots. Just some questions, some things like that, where we get into some more stuff that's probably too technical for a lot of the people that will be listening, but I think it'll provide a lot of value to the people that are right at that stage. So,
and I wish I would have watched something like this 3 years ago.
Yeah,
it would have saved me thousands of dollars. So, I mean, you may not think it's for you, but it might be worth a listen, even though we're saying this at the end. It could help you save some money, or at least maybe even more, just get you into photography.
Yeah. So we'll get into more of the setting stuff and some future podcasts coming down the line. We finally knocked that other podcast out about ethical shot distance, which we talked about for a long time. So we got to get the navigation one, because we've told people we will do that, and we get tons of requests for those. So work on that, Aaron. Perhaps a slide deck with some visuals would be nice. Maybe some printouts for.
Wait a minute, that just went past my pay grade.
Let's just wing it in your office. Okay. All right, man. Well, thanks, and thanks everyone who's listening. Make sure and let us know if you got any questions, or feel free to contact us about this camera stuff anytime. And stay gritty, everybody. Good luck on your hunts. All right, bye. All right, friends. Thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Don't forget about our deal with Mountain Ops. Type in the word gritty at checkout and get 20% off until the end of the year. For those of you who have not seen the Full Draw Film Tour this year and want to go, check out their website for their tour schedule. And if you haven't done so, go and subscribe to our YouTube channel or to the Gritty Bowman TV podcast on iTunes or Podbean, so you can see all the latest video content we have produced. And be sure to have a look at the new Elk 101 website, where you can find our podcast and other great elk hunting content. Thank you for taking the time to leave us your feedback. We really appreciate your sincere support of our show. Finally, let me leave you with this quote by President Theodore Roosevelt, who in 1905 said, "In a civilized and cultivated country, wild animals only continue to exist at all when preserved by sportsmen. The excellent people who protest against all hunting and consider sportsmen as enemies of wildlife are ignorant of the fact that in reality, the genuine sportsman is by all odds the most important factor in keeping the larger and more valuable wild creatures from total extermination." Friends, always take the time to educate those around you about your role as a hunter in preserving the wild creatures of this world. If you don't, who will? As always, good luck on your hunts, and stay gritty.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
Gritty Bowman.